Good morning, everyone. I'm going to give people a few more minutes to hop on before we start. Our icebreaker is going to be favorite story from your childhood. So I'll give you a few minutes to maybe think about that, and I will hop back on. I did get an email from Lisa at Waypoint. Unfortunately, she cannot be here today, but is looking forward to the minutes, and also heard from Julie from SCAN, and she's representing SCAN at a conference today. So she's looking forward to catching up on the minutes as well. I think Sarah Kay is going to join us today. Hopefully she got the second round of the agenda. So that'll be great. And we'll just give folks a few more minutes. Hey, Jackie, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
That's a beautiful ceiling up over your head. I
Oh,
love it.
thanks. Our house was built in the 1800s, so we have like a lot of really post and beam old stuff, and then the newer addition on the back that looks, same from the outside but totally different on the inside.
I love it. I love that feeling. It's just so welcoming.
It's nice. It's cozy.
Yeah. Oh, great. Mackenzie's hopping on.
Morning, everyone. I'm just going to eat my breakfast off camera for a few more minutes, and then I'll turn my camera on.
No problem. Hey, Jackie, can we do a test? I wasn't sure if you wanted to show the kind of the chart that you shared with Amy and me a while ago, or if you just wanted to talk through the big ideas. What works best for you?
I have something. So depends like what chart, which one. There's so many
No, I
different
can tell you there's a whole bunch. I'm picturing one where you had kind of seats at a table, like the different organizations, or if that's been introduced in a different way, because that was quite a long time ago.
So I've been playing around with that a little bit, and then I created 2 more slides that I think they're not complete yet, but they're almost there. But it talks more about the New Hampshire AUIC and our 5 different pillars that we'd be under. We kind of be doing in that way and what would fall under those pillars. So it's just a Canva visual that shows those pillars and what would fall underneath that and how that would interact with what we're doing with Maine right now. I can also touch on some new, they have to go through the general council one more time, but on a national level, we were able to change national regulations when it comes to how to start an affiliate in New Hampshire, because the way that they were having us do it and the way they've done it throughout the state, at the country throughout the years is just not really working anymore. So we were able to change it. And so they're just finalizing it at national. And then we'll be able to use the NHAUIC while we're becoming accredited and while we're while we're forming a 501c3 that is New Hampshire AUIC. So we'll be able to do both at the same time instead of waiting a year and not being able to use that name.
So that's great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful news.
So it's exciting. We get to use the name soon.
Yeah. So wait just a few minutes for people to hop on, and I'm going to begin the meeting. I'm Joanne Roberts, and I am the lead consultant for Vital Communities for the ECE initiative. And as we kind of popcorn around and introduce ourselves, the icebreaker for today is when you were young, because we are focused on ECE, were there any favorite books that you loved to have read to you or that you loved to read? I still have copies of my Raggedy Ann and Andy books that had wonderful colored pictures in them from way back when. I misspelled my name in the cover of one of them. I was young enough that I was just trying to spell my name. So I've always kept that one, a couple of those. And I was a big Frances fan, like Bedtime for Frances, or I think it was like bread and jam for Frances and something about the eggs that she didn't like to eat. I remember the pictures, and I remember my grandmother reading them to me quite often. So I was a big book fan even when I was little. Hi, John. Thanks for joining us today. How are you? Can you hear us and connect? I know he's at a conference today. Oh, there
Hello.
you go.
I was a big Dr. Seuss fan, mainly because my fairly quiet father seldom got more animated than when he would read Dr. Seuss books, and so it was really fun that was a thing that really drew him out. So that was an additional reason to get into it. So
Wonderful.
yeah.
I can just picture that actually, the way you described it. Hello, Sarah. How are you?
I'm good. I'm having to laugh. I've been sorting through many piles of books that we have here, and we've kept books for our grandchildren from 2 generations now. And I was realizing one of the favorite books that I had as a small child was one it's a large format book called Stories That Never Grow Old. And there were, like 3 or 4 full page stories with lots of color pictures. So I got it out and I was thinking, well, I'll read some of this to my grandchildren. And they're horrible stories. It's not anything that I would read to them now. And I was thinking, like, what am I going to do with this book now? This was this whole big discovery I made within the last week. So
Oh,
I haven't answered that last question yet, but I loved Stories That Never Grow Old.
I love it. Hey, Jackie, welcome. Thanks for being here today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Mine was The Pokey Little Puppy. Only because I remember my parents, those were the books they used to sell at Shaw's, like Market Basket when I was little. They used to be over in the corner, and they used to get a magazine, and I used to get one book. And so that was one of the books that I got. And for some reason, that was my favorite. That and The Grover Don't Turn This Page. For some reason, I remember that one too. I don't know why.
I love it. Hi, Mackenzie. Can you, I see you're giving us great expressions. Do you want to share a book from when you were little?
Morning, everyone. I'm sad to say that I don't remember having a favorite book when I was really little, but I remember picking up my bookworm sort of habits like around 8 or 9, and I really loved the Shel Silverstein poetry books, like Falling Up and Where the Sidewalk Ends. And there was one more that I really loved. What was it? I don't know, but the smell of the books from the library really is such a comforting smell to me. And I'm a book person now as an adult, and I really want to build one of those take a book, leave a book mailboxes. So that's my goal soon.
Little free library.
Exactly.
There's one up by Tewksbury Pond. And when we walk up on the rail trail, I can't help myself. I have to open it. And just that sensation of opening that door, seeing what's inside feels like a mystery present every time. Hi, Amy, how are you?
I'm doing okay. I struggled a little bit with my everything, but this, and I figured it out, or it just came alive. I'm assuming children's book.
Yeah, favorite book when you were little that you either liked to have read to you or that you liked to read?
My first book that I remember liking is actually a big book that was too much for me that I had to pick through until I got old enough to read it, which is called In Miles to Go.
Oh.
And it follows, of course, a horse through and 2 children, based on a true story account of how a horse was saved during World War II. So, and I read it my whole childhood like it was this fantasy, and then I actually used it to teach ESL to 9th grader, and who's French and who loves horses. So I used the book, and it was they were struggling with the content, And I remember thinking, oh yeah, this is real. Like this is a real account of World War II, and it's pretty graphic, and but it was truthful and not graphic in a way that was over their heads. It was more like a main character dies, and they struggled with that a lot. It was very interesting. And then I actually got the book from the camp library way back in like the 70s, and I was trying to find copies for these kids, and the book is worth like a couple $1,000s, I guess. So, oh, geez Louise.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is quite a story that's like followed you through. That's really neat. Hello, Tammy. Thanks for joining us. Our icebreaker today is just a story that you used to love when you were little or that you still remember reading. And you might be with a little one and can't hop on, so I'll give you. Yeah, she's probably with a little one. Okay. Well, I'm glad that you're here with us, Tammy, and that you can hop in when you can. And Jackie, I'm really excited that you are here because we met months ago and you were brainstorming ideas, and I kept saying to folks, there's something coming around the corner, and we have turned that corner. So I'm excited about that, and would love to hear, how you're doing, and maybe you could just mention what you were talking to us about, being able to do two things at once at the national level. And yeah, it's just this concept that you have.
Yeah, so just for anybody who just like wants a little quick catch up, a really quick one, I've gotten pretty good at telling it pretty short. So this came out, this revisiting NACI in New Hampshire from a policy and advocacy lens came out about 1.5 years ago. It was a 6-month contract through National AUIC and a funder in New Hampshire that kind of wanted to test the waters. About 4 months in, New Hampshire funders said, we really like this concept. We like the direction it's going. 6 months isn't enough. Let's give you another year. So I'm wrapping up my 1.5 years of doing this. We're working with funders to move forward, just at least getting another year out of this, and seeing what we can do moving forward. We've been working with AUIC on a national level. The ways in which states become accredited has kind of always followed the same pathway until recently. Recently, they've been opening up, making it a little bit easier for states to have an affiliation with NACI. So like Louisiana has Louisiana State College as their fiscal agent. That's the first time in the country that a college has stood up NACI. We are the first model. We are actually a pilot that national use because we are being stood up by our sister state, Maine AUIC. So they're partnering with us as our fiscal to help us through the process of becoming an affiliate in New Hampshire. The challenges we faced a little bit were, in order to become an affiliate, you have to have a 501c3 stand you up or become a 501c3. But if you do, it has to be under a different name. That's why the New Hampshire ECI came up. It was kind of an incubation for NACI, which is what I'm under. So we've been really working with national a lot and really pushing the idea of making it a little bit simpler. So if we're going to do a 501c3 and we're going to also do the incubation process for becoming an affiliate, that we use the same name and we use it at the same time and we file all the paperwork at the same time. National said yes. They passed it through the general counsel. They're working to make it official, but it's a go. So it's going to be a lot easier for us to be able to use the New Hampshire AUIC before we technically become an affiliate. It takes about a year. They have different departments that only meet at a certain time, so they've got to pass it through each department. But we'll be able to use it and operate and still get all of the benefits that we would get by being an affiliate. So that's kind of where we are right now. And in the work that I've been doing for the last 1.5 years, it's really been about building relationships with existing networks, with existing organizations, coalitions, members, accredited programs that aren't accredited. We are not NACI in New Hampshire is not just working with accredited programs and its members. We're working with everybody. Anything that encapsulates early childhood education. We're going to be able to work on that. Every NACI in New Hampshire has, every NACI in the country has a niche. They have something that makes them very special. You don't get a lot of money from national. You do in the sense of you get a portion of the membership dues, but New Hampshire is a small state. We're not going to get a whole bunch that's going to be able to fund something. So we look for outside funding pieces. But I think I just lost my train of thought, but it'll come back. Hold on. Sorry. So the niches that happen, like Vermont's, I've met with Vermont AUIC, Connecticut AUIC, and a lot of AUIC in the country. And like Vermont has their professional development, working professionalism, that piece of that. we've actually reached out to members and a lot of organizations and people in childcare on the boots on the ground. We've had over 100 meetings. And we found that our niche seems to be how can we contribute and support the existing director networks that are happening across the state right now? Could we create a statewide director network that can pull 1 or 2 representatives from each network up to bring that information collectively to a table that other people are also sitting at, and try to get those voices out there from that level? We also are looking at the idea of maybe having access to some grants and some money that we could say, so if a director network isn't sustainable, they can call and say, we're having a really hard time. We think we only have a couple more months. What can you do? And we can say, let's see what kind of funds we can help you. We in no way would come in and say and dictate what each region would do as their director network, because that's completely their space. We just want to help support that space. And that's kind of the role that we're really kind of crafting out based on all the feedback that we've gotten from lots of different people. And I did share slides with you, Joanne. I didn't know if you could share them. If I share from my computer, for some reason I go mute and I can't talk.
Oh, okay.
You can, it's no big deal. It just talks about that. It's kind of, and I can also send them all out to you.
That would be great.
I can, do that. It just talks about having 5 different pillars that I've really been working on. So the networking and professional development pillars. We have infrastructure framework, which is New Hampshire specific to that, power to the profession, grassroots organizing, voices from the field, those pieces. We also have the policy and advocacy piece, which again is like the grassroots organizing, conveying information about state and federal movements, and support participation and advocating on a state and a federal level. We'd love to get more people involved in that, get more stories out there, continue working with some amazing partnerships with amazing organizations that we've been able to come across. And really just supporting that. We also have advancing equity and accreditations and memberships. I'm also working with the state right now on the NACI pilot piece that's in their GSQ. We have 34 accredited programs in New Hampshire. Only 12 of those programs have crosswalked into GSQ, which means we have 22 programs that aren't utilizing all of those quarterly dollars that you can get when you do crosswalk into GSQ. So we're really kind of deep diving into our accreditations to find out, in the last 3 years, how many programs have we lost? Why have we lost them? And what can we do to do it better and be more effective and efficient moving forward? So we're working to create a lot of easier pathways and how the information is shared about becoming accredited with NACI and what the benefit and the value is. Because if there's not value in it, a lot of people aren't going to do it because they're so busy with everything they're trying to work so hard on doing. So we want to make sure that what we're putting together is something that shows value for their time and their energy and their efforts. That's kind of where we are.
One of the things I've experienced over the last year is trying to break through the different silos of work, as far as what the different organizations are focused on and what they're doing, and understanding all the moving parts.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we talked about several months ago was the concept that you talked about is kind of getting all the key folks together and making statewide information available, which I find is hard, even at the legislative level.
Yeah.
Mackenzie's been great, have others keeping us informed. And I'm wondering, I think I heard you say that's kind of part of the work that you're going to be able to do.
Yes.
And when you think of the major organizations, it would be helpful for me to know what ones that, when your years of experience, I'm familiar with ELNH, I'm familiar with New Futures,
Mm-hmm.
Moms Rising, and also ECEA, the Upper Valley. And I'm wondering, what are some of the other major organizations that you'd be working with around that table so that we're all getting the same information?
Yeah, so the organizations that I've been lucky enough to work with is you guys over at ECEA, Moms Rising. They've been amazing. I'm working with ELNH, working with SCAN, working with After School Network, the YMCAs, Easter Seals. There's a lot of different groups that have value in this kind of industry, in this what we're trying to form. And I agree with you 100%. There has to be a really comprehensive and easy way that we can get information that starts at the top, get that to the bottom so people know what's happening on boots on the ground. And then those boots on the ground individuals can then say, okay, what they're doing at the top, it's not reflective of what we're experiencing down here. How can we change that? Like, how can we start those motions and get all of that information out? So a lot of what we're trying to do is figuring out how we can all collectively come together and start giving information out that is accurate, that is updated, and that is easy to understand as to how it falls into what you do every single day. Like, it's one thing to look at bills and say, okay, SB 237, SB 170. Those are just kind of bills. And if you're not in it, because when I was working in childcare, if anybody talked to me about legislation or policy and advocacy, I'd be like, nope, nope, nope. I'm going to stay in my little corner over here with my tiny humans, and I'm going to be happy over here. The idea of those things just seemed so big and a little out of my reach at the time, I thought. And then once we were deep diving into it, finding that we can say, okay, SB 237 is this, 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 and this. This is how it's going to impact you directly right now. These are the things that you could get later. This is what we didn't get, why we didn't get it. And maybe we can have discussions about how we can craft a way to ask other people for it. Talking different people across, bipartisan pieces and all of those aspects. So those are the organizations that we've been working on. We're always open to working with more organizations. We're definitely looking just to kind of connect dots and be that supportive organization that's coming in.
Do you also often network with Vermont? You talked about Vermont and professional development and being through Vital Communities, the bi-state whole concept. I'm just wondering how that connects.
Yeah, so I've reached out to Vermont. I reached out to Luann from Let's Grow Kids. I chatted with her about their program. A lot of the work I've done too is trying to figure out how to run additional, this statewide director network concept. Like, that would be one of the initiatives that we would start with and get that up and going and see what that could do. That's our niche. That's kind of what we've heard that New Hampshire wanted and needed. So we want to fill that role. Talking to Vermont was great because they were able to talk about their upstarting process, and now that they're starting to sunset, what that looks like, and being able to offload some of these programs. So I believe when I talked to their Vermont AUIC, I believe their AUIC has got up to 12 programs now, I think, because I believe that they have taken a handful from Let's Grow Kids. So they were strong enough to be independent and stand on their own, but they just needed a home to live in. So they're living with Vermont AUIC. And I believe they're up to 25 employees over there now for their AUIC. I'm a little jealous of the 25.
When Emily Tenenbaum came to our steering committee, she did a great job providing an overview, and it was really, and the word great sticks in my head today, but it was great to hear that they have a real process for the sunsetting plan, and that they aren't just walking away at all. They're very much so following all of the legislative actions, making sure the funding's going where it's going. And she mentioned the benefit of several of the Let's Grow Kids members who are now part of the Vermont AUIC, that the conversation is so easy because they understand all that happened, and that it's flowing pretty well. But they really want to maintain a leadership role for the next several years, making sure that what they said that was going to happen is actually going to happen, which was wonderful to hear. And I'm glad that you're connecting with them as well. Something that's coming up, Jackie, I'll mention to you if you have an interest, is a bi-state panel through the Public Health Network of the Upper Valley, November 6th. I will get you more information on that. I will be part of that. And even if you just want to shoot me information that you want me to share with the legislators who are sitting around the table, who are at the panel, the focus is not only on ECE, but it's also on housing and other key topics in the Upper Valley. But I will reach back out to you, give you that information. I'm learning more about it. I connected with Alice this morning to let her know that I'll be there. But I would love some specific information that's, like 5 bullet points. What's happening in New Hampshire? What should they know?
Okay, I would love to. That would be wonderful. Yeah,
okay.
I'd be happy to help with that.
And Tammy added something to the chat. Sorry. Don't know if I missed hearing you mention First Children's Finance. They're also working with CDD and Vermont AUIC. That's great.
I did not know that. So thank you so much for that information. And I think Amy has her hand up.
Oh, good. Amy.
Jackie, I don't know. I think what I've heard grumblings from a few NAEYC accredited centers as far as GSQ goes is not separating the out of school time.
Yeah.
Is a major barrier. So they're either dropping their out of school to get to access the money, or they're just not doing it at all because they're not separating, which is ridiculous. So if you can't meet every single, your NEYC accredited, your early childhood program, leave it alone. That's my message.
Yeah.
Or it's really, if they can't even access these funds being accredited, I would give it up.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, we have. So one of the things that I'm going to be doing with this, the GSQ RFP contract that we have is there's a small little subcontract in there, which is for different pilots. And one of them is the NACE doing that deep dive into figuring out the accreditations. I'm going to be the first one to tell you that National AYC is doing amazing things, making it a lot easier to become a member, to stay a member, and to become accredited and stay accredited. They still have work to do. The process is a bit clunky. It's time consuming. It takes a lot of workforce and effort, which right now we know is completely strained. So a lot of it was going to be putting together a cohort of those who were members or those who were accredited and those who were not. I would love to hear from those who aren't accredited and why they dropped it, why they let it lapse, because I think all of those things are, all of the reasons for them doing that are completely and 100% valid. So we're really trying to figure out how we can support that and make it a little bit more streamlined and easier to understand how to become accredited for our New Hampshire programs. And then how can we start relaying that to national and saying, okay, we're losing programs because of this, this, and this. These things need to evolve with what's happening in education right now, especially with tiny humans and our communities. So really kind of giving New Hampshire back that voice on that national level where we can come to them and say, okay, now we are an affiliate and this is what New Hampshire has to say about what's going on and how to make things easier. I'm also kind of working a little bit with Connecticut. They're doing a deep dive in their memberships to find out what else they can give. Like there's what you can get on a national level, but then state by state, we can really work with the businesses and organizations within our state and offer our members additional benefits that will add value to that membership. So we're kind of doing deep dives with other states to find out what are they doing that they're adding for their state, for their members. Again, I'm not pushing for anybody to become a member. If they want to, great. If they did it for a year and didn't like it, tell me why I didn't like it and we'll figure out what we can do, but definitely do what's best for them. We want to meet people where they are, not where we think they should be. So I want to really make sure that we're working with people around that. But yeah, I definitely have heard that the same thing, Amy, about the separation between the out of school time. That's really complicating. And other people are just saying, you know what, our business is fine. We're managing. We're managing. We're not great, but we're managing. And it's less headache than having to become accredited or to do GSQ.
Becky, what's your timeline for starting these statewide meetings? Are you thinking at the start of 2024 or
we're
earlier?
We're hoping that by 2024 we'll start being able to use the actual New Hampshire AUIC, because that's when the paperwork's going to start to we're starting to put all that paperwork in and getting it all together to start pushing it through come January. We've already started doing some emails out to some of the director networks asking, if they'd love to all just get together and kind of chat about what this could look like. Networks don't have to do it. If you don't want to become part of this, you don't have to. It's just something, an additional resource that could be there to pull all of those voices from every region, from top to bottom, side to side in New Hampshire, and get all of that information collectively up towards where legislators can really access it easily. Or have access to contacts that they can then further go into those regions and find out additional information.
I think having one voice, but a lot of voices being part of that would be huge in New Hampshire. And just so helpful from the advocacy level too, knowing what's coming down the pike and how to advocate, having similar language as you put together for the governor for Week of the Young Child last year, those key things. And in regard to ELNH and some of the other organizations, you reached out to them and had this same conversation. I think we talked about that at the retreat. So people are comfortable with moving forward as a state.
Yeah, one of the things we wanted to make sure of is that what we were doing was completely transparent. we wanted to make sure that we vetted it through everybody. We talked to everybody. We took feedback from everybody, and we want as many voices in this and creating it as possible. So yeah, we made sure that it was kind of out there so people knew that it was there, it was coming. We just didn't know at the time where we were at, when we first started completing or coming up with this idea, we didn't know it was going to fit under NACI. And then all of a sudden, it's just the light bulb went off when we're talking with Maine, and they were like, why don't you just, I was like, oh yeah, we can do that. So it kind of started to just morph into this really natural niche that New Hampshire seems to want or need. And that could kind of set us apart from other states as well, because they do things a little differently. So, and there's some exciting opportunities around that. So it's tied into the funding that, we're looking for and getting. And so we're kind of excited about that. But yeah, so we're hoping to move forward and just making sure that whatever we're creating is what New Hampshire wants and needs. And not being don't want to be an organization that claims to be the voices for everybody, because we're only as good as the voices that we have on the ground and the people that we listen to. And so I want to make sure that what we're doing is listening to their stories and what they want and what they need, no matter if it's agreeing with what we're doing or not agreeing with what we're doing, but really shaping what we're doing as well. And I also, I do have an advisory committee that we just started. So we have an advisory committee because I had these ideas in my head, but having the committee that can say, that makes sense, that's ridiculous, that's great, that's not. I need all those voices in my head telling me that things need to be done a little bit better. So we're definitely in the process and moving quickly, which is wonderful.
And do you imagine your website being a key website for New Hampshire for people to go to get information? I've seen that as a need. And the New Hampshire websites, to me, as a novice in the field, are incredibly complex and difficult to sort through. And as part of the Vital Communities work, we began to put other people's websites onto the Vital Communities ECE website, just if people were landing on that page, where to go to. But it would be great to have, one hub. It's from your head nodding. I think that's one of the visions that you have.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, because I don't want to create a site that just talks about NACI. Like NACI's, but New Hampshire is more than just that. Like there are other organizations that are doing incredible and amazing things, and some that may touch on what we're doing and some that may not, but I still think it's all valuable information if we're talking about helping families and communities. So that's definitely an aspect.
Tammy Hazel has put two different things in the chat that I think are pretty important. Joanne, do you want to pick up on those?
Sure, thank you. She writes, Jackie, I'm a home provider and feel strongly that states need to have systems that allow us to build on an online portfolio. So when we need to renew our accreditation, stars, quality ratings, etc., it's all in one place and we can continue to build upon it as we need to renew. We spend far too much time completing the same paperwork over and over again.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. So one of the things that NACI is talking about on the national level is also reaching family childcare providers and home providers. Like how can they become accredited? That's not so clunky, that's not so time consuming, that's not so expensive. And so one of the things that they are really deep diving into is creating a 3-tiered system for becoming a family childcare to become accredited. So they're really kind of taking a lot of input that we've been talking about from the family childcare providers I've worked with in New Hampshire. And then other states are also doing some input into that about how we can make that less cumbersome, because family and home providers generally only have 1 or 2 people that are working in that home care. So being able to find the time to be able to fill out the paperwork, which can be extremely redundant, it's not a good utilization of their time. So we want to make sure that what we're doing is very streamlined, it's very effective, very efficient, and it's easy, and that there are supports built in for that. So I know for a lot of centers I've worked with that were accredited, some of the reasons why they were no longer accredited is because the accreditation process was very, very complicated. And when assessors came out, they didn't have the capacity to do such a deep dive into their program to find out what crosses over and what qualifies for accreditation pieces. Like, I see you're not using this, but how do you use this piece? Like being outside, those things like that, dress ups outside, stuff like that. So we're really trying to figure out how to make this very, very simple, very easy, and very valuable, because people are not going to do it if there's no value in it. I wouldn't. So I hope that helps.
Any other questions for Jackie, or thoughts or ideas as she's pulling this information and the people together to create what we've been talking about for a long time is this vacuum, and it seems like you're going to be really filling that need that we've heard quite a bit. Sarah, did you have a question or comment? No. Okay. Hey, Tammy.
I don't know if you can hear me over the kids.
Okay.
It's free play right now because I got one sleeping. My question is, with what you're trying to build, are you going to try and get a lot of Vermont providers in there as well?
We're
Needs?
kind of what we're doing for it's really strictly for New Hampshire, I think, right now, for like really building that New Hampshire AUIC presence, because we don't have that. And we also did, I mean, some of the holes that we want to fill in New Hampshire, I'm doing a director network. I'm working with Stratford County CAP, and we're creating a Region 6 director network. And we've had our first few meetings. Some of those meetings where somebody posed a really interesting question. Which organization throughout all of New Hampshire would be your go-to for early childhood education that covers the entire state? Nobody had an answer to that. So that right there was a problem. And that was one where we said, okay, how can we support everything that's going on in every region, also creating something that is needed in New Hampshire, and also something that can make the process of becoming accredited or a member, should you want to, a lot more easier and more transparent. Like, how do we do all of those things together? So that is definitely something that we took that was a really interesting takeaway, and a very eye-opening takeaway from that meeting when nobody could answer that question. And it was, it's statewide, for one organization statewide. So that's something that we're going to be working with the other organizations as well, saying, okay, how can we kind of work out and carve this out? Because if people on the ground are having a hard time identifying that, it's going to be really hard to get those trusting relationships and get the information that we need, to be able to get them what they need.
Yeah, I hear you. I agree. I would just take and say that I've been a provider for over 20 years now in Vermont. So if there's ever, you're just curious about how it might work in Vermont,
yeah,
I'd just like to say, feel free to reach out to me, because chances are I may very well know the answer.
Oh, thank you so much. I will take you up on that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tammy, it's my understanding in Vermont under the New Starts program that your highest step is in AUIC accreditation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's kind of a kick in the face if you're nationally accredited and you're a step 4 or step 3.
That's New Hampshire. New Hampshire, for some reason, we were crosswalking into a step 3, where Connecticut, Vermont, and other states crosswalk in at step 4.
So I think Vermont has made similar mistakes, and through earlier iterations of their QRIS, getting too fragmented in their requirements and bogging people down. And now they've basically, Tammy, please correct me, aligned to NAUIC and developmentally appropriate practices. As you go up, it's self-study up through accreditation. And it just really doesn't, I remember sitting in those meetings. At first, they weren't even going to put NAUIC in the steps at first. So I think they need to wake up, or there won't be any accredited centers in New Hampshire at all. Oh, you can't hear me.
Yeah.
Now we can't hear her.
Yeah, I agree, Amy. And the other thing is that I myself am considering dropping my STARS quality rating, because I don't see what the benefit is in having it anymore the way they've got things structured right now. And I'm due for a renewal this weekend. I'm making the big decision whether or not I do it or not. And I used to do it because it benefited families, because subsidy was attached to it. But now that's not even attached to it. So I see no benefit to doing it. And quite frankly, I'm nearing retirement. Do I really want to make this big investment in this when I'm not going to be around that much longer? So that's where I am.
Do you have the national accreditation?
I do not. I checked into it probably about 10 years ago. And as Jackie mentioned, it's far too expensive and far too time consuming.
Got it. So we create our own barriers in this.
Yeah. I mean, and one of the things that I'm going to be doing for New Hampshire is because we don't really have a clear way, like even in New Hampshire, if you were to ask me who does accreditations right now, I can tell you who used to do them and where that contract lays. Where it is now, I'm not really entirely 100% sure. I'm still trying to track it down. But one of the things that we're going to be doing is creating an accreditations toolkit, something that's really simple, that really goes through the steps of accreditation, the process, all the pricing's there, everything is right there. Contacts where anybody can contact me if they want, if they have any questions about that. If I don't know the answer, I will find somebody that does, and I will put them in contact with that person as soon as I possibly can, because there are things I definitely don't know a lot about the entire process itself. That's something I'm working on. But I'd be happy to put those in contact with others that do. Even if it's at a national level, I have those national contacts. So if it's a bigger problem that needs to be fixed, we can put those voices up to the national level as well.
So do the rules for all of this lie within New Hampshire, within DHHS, or are these because it's tied to funding? You know, because like as Tammy was just pointing out in Vermont, if STARS is no longer related to subsidies, what's the leverage for engagement with that process?
Yeah. So the what we have in New Hampshire right now is just, and it does lay within DHHS in the sense of their GSQ. So the way it's tied in, for some reason, I'm not entirely sure why, a few years ago, they decided to have anybody that crosswalks in with any accreditation from before, they crosswalk in at a level 3 or step 3. So they're at the step 3 right now, and they're really kind of worrying about how to get people from step 3 to step 4. My concern is, great that they're in step 3. We know that they're in quality. Something is being measured for quality. That is great. What about the ones that are step 1, step 2? How do we engage them and give them the supports needed to go up in their steps, should they want to go up in their steps? So I think with this new pilot that just, or this RFP contract that came out that it's about, I want to say it's a little over 4 million, 4.4. Mackenzie might be able to correct me if I'm wrong on that one. So that GSQ pilot, it's about $4.4 million, and it's broken down to smaller pilots for other credits. So there's like a Montessori piece in there. I think there's some after school pieces in there. There's definitely the NACI piece in there. They're really deep diving into the GSQ for New Hampshire and how we can make it more accessible, make it better, make it more understandable, and how can we make it more comprehensive, and how it, and then start tying together how it connects with everything that's going on in New Hampshire when it comes around quality and accreditations.
I think they dropped in Vermont. I think they dropped the link to the subsidy due to equity issues. They identified it as an equity issue. And as far as New Hampshire goes, check out Vermont Sparks effort. That they've actually realized they needed to put more money into supports. That's where some of the Let's Grow Kids people went, and I believe that part is contracted out of Vermont AEYC, but it's SPARQS. But they're investing in the supports, and they're trying to break down, at least for center-based. Tammy, I have not been able to dive into Vermont process for their family childcare, but yeah, and they also switched to class in Vermont instead of the ERS scales. Am I right?
They did, and there's no funding for class either. Another big expensive hurdle for home providers.
It's incredibly expensive. Classes, you think AEYC is expensive, classes more expensive than that.
Yep.
I think it's a better system. Personally, I think it's a better assessment system if you can figure out how to do it. But it's just a barrier itself.
Mackenzie added the link to DHHS for those of you who can see it in the chat, and that will also be in the notes as well. We talked about class, Amy, at the subgroup outside on the deck and the cost for providers. And potential sources for funding came out of that conversation. I think it was something that we were going to try to look into. There was, I don't know who they were, but there was two people from one center who were sitting on the left, and she had like a purple shawl on. And
That was yeah, Maple Leaf and what's the for-profit partner?
The is it Visualize, Creativize,
Yeah.
Visualize, and the other
Yeah.
one was Magic Mountain was
Yeah.
there as well.
And they talked about that and the steep amount of cost to go through it. And one of them had gone through certain parts of it, but not all of it yet. And it didn't seem like there was a comprehensive flow. It was more of those, you can use it, but you're definitely kind of on your own to figure it out, was my takeaway from the conversation from those who were using class. But they did seem to see the benefit of it. What kind of organizations can people go to in Vermont to get funding to do that work?
Well, the support is supposed to be provided by Sparks. That was the intent of setting up Sparks, to help people navigate their way through this. The funding is always an afterthought. So I don't know if they're preparing to purchase materials, but they're short staffed, they're barely open. Where are they going to take all these trainings and make all this TA time in any system?
Yes.
So I'll give you a brief scoop of where I'm at, because I think this will add to the conversation. I'm up for renewal, both my license and my stars. So I'm working with VAC through the Sparks program that you've mentioned. I need to have a scored assessment. They're using class. I have no idea what class is all about, never seen it. I think it's totally unfair that I'm going to have to face a scored assessment with no preparation in any way at all. And they're not giving me any time to come up to speed. They're not offering any trainings on class prior to the assessment. So I'm not even going to get that. They're just going to show up one day for a scored assessment, and that's it. So I think the whole process is wrong. They keep telling us not to worry because we're in the first year grace period. So we're going to be able to maintain our stars, but we're going to have to do it again in a year. That is totally.
But why? It should never be mysterious. It should never be mysterious. You should always upfront know what you're getting evaluated on, against, about. What is the standard you're working with? And if they're not willing to tell you that, I wouldn't be willing to be part of the process. And I would be screaming about this.
Well,
and is that what we should be doing? Or should we be screaming about this process that is set up to be this? This is an equity disincentive right there. It's a power and control move. And whenever you introduce a power dynamic into this in this blatant a way, that raises equity questions in my mind right there.
yeah. Well, see, the thing, CDD and VAC are not up to speed. But my view is that they set a deadline and they're sticking to the deadline. I mean, they don't even have the online portfolio that they're supposedly in development right now, ready for me to put in my quality improvement plan. It's not even ready, but I'm supposed to prepare for all of this and have it done so that I can submit it by January 18th. It's just not right.
It is not right.
I don't know who to complain to. I voiced this to several people, but I don't know if it's going anywhere. I don't have a clue.
So the central key on this should be the deputy commissioner in charge of CDD, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but how do you get that person's ear? You know, and if it's just one person trying to get that person's ear, how effective is it?
Right.
No, it's only the people that are in this 1 year grace trial period, if you want to call it, that are being affected by this. That's a small percentage of the entire workforce. So how loud is our voice?
Wait a minute, how, but no, it should be very loud because you are the pilot group. And what they work out with you would be the framework for going forward in the future. So you should have a very loud voice. And how did you end up in this cohort? Just because you're due?
Because I'm due, yes.
In New Hampshire, we had something similar with the GSQ, where as there was a center, there was a businesswoman in a center, and she came up and said, "This is the cost of what it would be to be a GSQ, quality system, whatever step you're on." She's like, "This is the cost of it." Brought her concerns up to the level she should have. Nothing happened. She jumped over, went to the representative from her area, talked to that representative that then went up, then passed that information on to the governor. She kind of was like, okay, I've reached everybody I can. I'm jumping to the governor and I'm telling the governor about this. I can tell you within 2 weeks, she had a meeting with the general counsel and people talking about this. So I think that having that voice, just find out like who your representative is that's near you, who can you contact and tell them this and say, I've reached out to these people or who I've reached out to, I'm not getting anything back, because you're their constituent. Like they're there to make sure that you're getting what you need so you can vote them in for the next time around. So if you bring it to them, they can bring it up to a higher level and maybe, or give you the contact information to do that yourself and just say, this is my struggle. These are who I've reached out to. How can you help us? Because if I'm going through this, I know I'm not the only one. So how do we
Rebecca Holcomb is one of your reps, isn't she?
She is, and I have a good relationship with her too.
She would be all over something like this. What you need to do is write a brief paragraph that just says exactly what you said about, they won't tell me this, they won't tell me that, they don't have this prepared, they don't have this, but they are going to come in and do a blind, scored evaluation of my program. And they're telling me just trust them. She will be livid. I guarantee you. She would
Sarah,
be,
what about Reva Murphy?
it would be fine to speak with her too, but I think speaking to both of them about this, but I think that if you want direct action, that Rebecca would be more effective. I mean, they're two sort of different entry points. And so, yes, always use multiple entry points. What's Lynn Robbins' position with CDD now? Do you know that name?
Yeah, I think she stars now with CDD.
So would that have any relevance here?
Yeah.
Okay, then she is another person. I worked with her in a past life and have a good relationship with her. Haven't been working with her currently, but if you were to send to me an email with just whatever you're going to say to Reva and to Rebecca, I would also get it. I would use it and create a conversation with Lynn.
Okay, I can do that. I'll try and get something together this weekend.
I know it's one more piece of work, but I don't make it complicated. I'm asking for simply a very simple set of sentences that you just put into writing the words that you just said. No deeper than that, no more than that. Just this thing about this process.
Okay.
Right. No more complicated. We're not talking details here. We're talking the overall structure of the process and what you have been told to do and what you've not been given.
Sure. Yeah, I'll send it to you first, and that way you can put your stamp of approval.
Okay. Happy to do that. And then I'm glad to support you in getting it to Rebecca and Reva too. I mean, those would be the three people that I would think of adding Lynn to that. And Amy has just put information about Lynn in the in the chat.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is we're talking about a short-term focused advocacy effort here that comes from the voice of providers. So let's just do it.
Yeah.
And it's about using the old-fashioned way of who knows who, and let's use our relationships.
Yeah, that's what we've had to kind of do here when we had that, the issue with the GSQ, and they were talking about how to fix it and going to all the right people, but the right people necessarily didn't have the answers or might not have the capacity to be able to answer those questions right then. So they said, sorry, we're going to take it to, the governor and see what the governor says and see what happens. And then there was a little bit more oversight into the GSQ, like, why am I getting this letter? What is happening on the ground level? How can we deep dive into this? So that got a lot of organization. It got that, that business owner together. It got, the state talking about it with them. It got like a higher positions talking about that as well and kind of paying attention to what was happening on that level. So even if you wanted to do like a tiny little movement or a campaign piece around it, you could get other voices and just do a story collection where you're just collecting stories from centers and programs across your region, your state, pulling all those together and just giving that to your elected official and saying, okay, you wanted stories, like you want to know what we're struggling with here. To make it really simple, really easy for them to go through each one, kind of so that they could understand the climate without anybody being in the room to explain it to them. They could go through these stories and say, okay, I understand the struggle now. I understand how vast it is. It's all encompassing. It's a lot of people involved. How can we move this forward and work with you? So we've seen some more movement in that in New Hampshire, which has been lovely. We still need to see more, but we've seen some.
Amy, would ECEA have a list of the providers who are coming up, who are due in this year in Vermont? We don't have that information.
No, but I was wondering if Tammy and her starting points, in your starting points meetings, have you identified anyone else in this situation?
Yes, there's another provider in my network. Hers is actually due, I think, a month earlier than mine, if I remember right. So they're giving her even less time.
So maybe
Let's include her in this, so there are a couple of voices. Can we do that?
Sure, I can reach out to her. Yeah.
I think, like, Sarah, we've been talking to her and we've been talking over time. John, you've been in these conversations where New Hampshire is like, it's a mess, but you can talk to people, and in Vermont it appears like they have some things going for them, but it's very top down. It's just like, I can call Diane Chase. There's nobody I can call to help a brand new provider trying to open in Wilder that cannot get through with her water test. She keeps going through the cyclical, been going on for 6 weeks, and she's about to give up. And so we're trying to figure out who to contact again to stop getting emails that just copy and paste something out of the rule book that she's already done 6 weeks ago, she has heard nothing, and she's trying to get through the red tape. So, and in New Hampshire, they could come to me and I could say, give me a minute, I'll make a phone call. So there's give and take on each side of the river.
Hey, Amy, send me that one, because when I reach out to Lynn, again, this is the relationship piece. I can say, Lynn, who do we need to talk to?
Yeah. And that's been one thing in New Hampshire that's, like, as Amy said, that's been kind of nice, is you can just call Diane Chase. You could call somebody in any organization and be like, I have that contact number. Let me just call and ask that question. And you'll get those responses back. We definitely don't have all of our stuff together in New Hampshire, but we're definitely working towards that. And I think there's a lot more movement that's happening in New Hampshire. There's a lot more voices, which is wonderful. There's a lot more organizations that are kind of stepping in and saying, where's our role in here? Where's our voice in here? That needs to happen as well. We just need to really widen that network, and that we've been able to work on that in New Hampshire and try to bring all of this from the grassroots to the grass tops. We also have some of the legislators that are reaching out to us saying, we have concerns over zoning, over workforce, over race, whatever it is. How can you help us construct some legislation around that? We want to hear you guys do it. Like, tell us what to do, because you're doing it, we're not. So we're kind of getting a little bit more leverage and leeway that way, where they're finally saying, boots on the ground people are the experts. They're the ones that do this every single day. We should be talking to them. And that's what they're doing. They're reaching out through consultants, advocates, and then on the ground too, we have a lot of legislators that will go into programs. We have elected officials that will go into a program for a day, and then they'll get a tiny little mock paycheck, like without, with taxes taken out. It'll be like, okay, this is your day. Thank you for your 8 hours of work you've made. however much or however little. This is what every provider does every single day. So they kind of get an idea of what it is like to work in a program and to kind of be everything all at once to everyone, which is what educators with tiny humans are.
Tammy, thank you for bringing that up, and hopefully from the people here, there's definitely support in what you're saying, and hopefully they can break down some of those barriers that you were talking about and help you out. It just sounds like a terrible situation that you're in, and it's heartbreaking, to hear. It's just distressing to hear someone with your caliber and expertise and, work so hard in the field to be put in that position it's just terrible. So I'm glad you brought it up and let people know about it.
Yeah, and I definitely appreciate the support. Just hearing it, even if nothing comes of it, just hearing it is wonderful. Thanks.
Joanne, I wanted to ask another question of Jackie, and that's that, on our little screen of boxes here, Amy is here and has done this incredible job of creating the ECEA in partnership with so many providers in this area over the last 5.5 years. And so my question to you would be, what can we from this region of New Hampshire, specifically through the ECEA, offer in your agenda of creating a statewide directors network?
I mean, I would definitely love to learn more about like how ECEA became, how did it come from like an idea into fruition? Like, what was that? Because so much of what you do, I mean, you do incredible work up at with the ECEA, with behaviors, with staff, and everything.
And Amy did a very intentional process, so it is replicable.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'd love to have those conversations too, to see if you'd share some of that information with like some of the things that went well when you first did it, some things you would have done differently, some things that, some people that you would have reached out to that maybe you hadn't thought of at the very beginning. Like, I kind of want to learn from what other people have done and how we can support what you're doing up there as well. And then having some of that amazing work that you're doing up there. Because I think, what you do up there has been talked about throughout the state. The programs that you have, what you're doing up there, the people want it replicated. They want something similar in their regions as it would apply to their region. So it'd be really interesting to figure out like, how could we do that? How could we help support that? How could we move that forward? And how could I learn from what you guys have done and continue to do and your process in getting upstarted? I think those conversations would be invaluable.
And of course, the mistakes we made at COAS that were our learnings in COAS that benefited us to be successful in the Upper Valley, because this is actually the second round of network building.
And you did a fair amount of quick pilots and trials, learned from them, abandoned the parts that didn't work, and then moved on to what you really wanted to do. But yeah, Jackie, so it's not just the Upper Valley, it's really the whole Northwest quadrant of the state. If you think of COAS and the Upper Valley as sort of a consolidated region.
Sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry. And I was just going to say, I was like trying to throw it down there so it would stop ringing. But yeah, so I actually do some work with COAS as well, involved with some of the stuff that they're doing up there, and helping, Errol's helping me on some things down here. And then working with different regions. There's a lot of people that came up and, even at the summit that we went to 2 weeks ago, they said, the Be Strong Family Summit, they said, I'm in Nashua and I want to start a director network. How do I do that? Who do I go to? They're like, we talk to other people and we just don't know how to do it. And I was like, okay, let's see if we can put you in contact with people that can. Let's help you do that. And they're like, what if we don't have enough money? Well, let's see what we can do about that too. Like, let's not make them do this all by themselves. Let's see if we can get every region and every director network that wants to be stood up everything they possibly need, because the more they have, the stronger they become. And those voices are imperative into what we're trying to do in New Hampshire, because we're finally getting people to listen to us. In New Hampshire, it's no longer like, this childcare people are whining again because they don't have something. It's actually like, no, there's a deep dive in here. There are lots of people that can't work because they don't have childcare. You have police officers, firemen, you have military that can't, there are things that are happening that because they lack that piece. So how can we really start that conversation and move those forward? So that's really what we're hoping to be able to do. And we do have some momentum, so we definitely don't want to lose it, because if we lose it in New Hampshire, I don't know when we're going to get it back.
Great. Well, I appreciate you're giving us that overview, and it seems that there's a light in the tunnel, Jackie, because we've been talking about through Vital Communities that this is a short-term concept through Vital Communities for ECE, and looking over the next years to make that bridge to another organization to take this on. And that's why I asked about your connection with Vermont as well, being a person in the Upper Valley going back and forth across the river. We're all just one community combined, but with different legislative efforts that are going on. So that is wonderful. I'm wondering from folks in this group for our regular updates, Mackenzie, do you have some information from Moms Rising that you wanted to share with us?
What is helpful for you all to know? I have, I could give a quick update of some of the bills I'm seeing come out of the legislature, if that's helpful.
Yes, please. That'd be great.
So just to give you all an idea of where we are at in the process for the legislative session in New Hampshire, we just hit the Senate filing deadline yesterday. So what that means is that our representatives have already submitted their ideas for legislation, and there are about 840 so pieces there. And the Senate deadline was yesterday. So we'll start to see those become public within the next few days. And I am seeing quite a few pieces related to childcare, which I have shared my little watch list with you all again, and I'm happy to put it in the chat for you all to take a look at. And this is a working, living, breathing spreadsheet as things continue to come up. Sometimes two representatives will realize they have the same bill, and so they'll combine them. And so there's quite a bit related to childcare licensing, for example, staffing ratios. There are some, I've had one of the things that I do, and if it's helpful to know, is this past year, I started the Moms Caucus within the legislature here. And so we had a Moms Caucus meeting last night, and I get to have this great insider information from some members who are part of the Moms Caucus about their legislation. And so I heard from Representative Rebecca McWilliams last night about her two pieces of legislation tied to childcare. One, which would basically make childcare providers eligible for state benefits, including health, dental, pension, and student loan forgiveness. So excited about that. She's also bringing up a workforce fund bill, which was tangentially sort of related to the larger childcare package that we all worked on this year. And so that is a dedicated fund that can be funded and then pulled for grants for childcare centers for recruitment and retention. We've got quite a few bills from Ross Berry, who is the chair of the House Special Committee on Childcare. It seems like he's got some pretty specific things about licensing, and we don't know the bill language of those bills yet, so I don't know exactly what he aims to do, but it sounds like from some of my colleagues that he wants to look at ratios. I don't have the numbers right. I'm going to mess this up, but essentially allowing one more child if you hit a certain number of children. I'll update you more on it later when I have more information, but yeah, so there's that. And then I know for sure, so like I said, the Senate filing deadline was just 2 days ago, so we don't really know what's coming out that from the Senate yet, but I've had a couple conversations, and it sounds like there will be some sort of preschool bill, pre-K, mixed delivery. We had 2 bills last session that were retained in committee, from Senator Becky Whitley and one from Representative Mary Heath. They're both retained, which means that they can be brought back to life essentially this session and worked on, and maybe even rolled into a new piece of legislation. And so that's the rumor that I'm hearing, although it's not a rumor, it's confirmed. I don't have the details on what that policy looks like yet, but the sponsors of that legislation know how I feel about pre-K and mixed delivery and kindergarten access. And so this would just be, I believe, another pilot-ish type program. So more details when we have language for that. Trying to think of what else as it relates to this group. I don't know if you all do any school age work, but there is a decent number of bills around school choice, that kind of thing. So it looks like it's going to be a busy year. Typically the second year of a biennium tends to be a bit slower, but it doesn't. That we're not following that pattern right now. And because of a few special elections in the House, the margins of party are quite close. And so it could be interesting to see how this session goes. Yeah.
Thank you, Mackenzie. I was in Concord yesterday for 2 hours listening to the new minimum standards and competency-based learning conversation. And then in the afternoon, they were going to have 2 sessions focused on mental health holistically in New Hampshire. And obviously, student mental health was something that they're focused on as well. And the, piece of finding something you're passionate about, self-esteem, sense of belonging, often connects with competency-based learning as well. They were very crowded. There were some picketers outside, not pleased with the current Commissioner of Education, that was pretty clear, even though he wasn't present at the meeting. So you'll see me in and out of those different meetings as well. I'm trying to follow up on that too.
Is that the 306 rules?
Those are the 306s. There's a lot of concern because the commissioner took out the commissioner hired a group to put the 306s together. It goes to the commissioner, he's made changes, and they are kind of being held responsible for those changes, although they can't say that it was the commissioner that made those changes. The representatives let the audience know that they knew that it was more complicated than just what's being packaged. And just like we talked about today, that funding has to come hand in glove with whatever they're talking about. That came up yesterday. So there are definitely conversations about that. I noticed that Jackie popped off. So just so you know, I will write her a thank you note. Sarah is going to be hopping off momentarily. Your little one has done a great job getting through this lengthy conversation. I will just add that the Couch Foundation is working on data and reports. So I wanted advocacy to be aware of that. So when that information comes through the organizations that they're working with, that would be great for us to have, to use that data as well. Susan Titterton, I wanted to thank Tammy, Sarah, for making that connection. Susan is leading the ECE as a profession in Vermont, and she's coming to a workforce meeting October, I believe, 23rd, which will be great to hear from her on that. So thank you for making that connection. Anything else we want to talk about over the next 2 weeks or to add?
Can I just ask Mackenzie if there's, makes my stomach turn to hear all these different fragmented bills coming up. Like, who asks for state to become, are they going to become state employees? Has that been vetted? Like, and is there any concern with those people that there's multiple asks and nobody, like, there's no cohesion? Are they looking for cohesion in the state? Are they looking for someone to step into that role? Because it seems like it's really it kind of bites us to, go in different directions. Nobody knows what it is. We don't actually know if that's what the providers want. That's what this rep wants from somebody they heard, or their, Ross's information from what he's experienced. Like, so there's a bill, but there's no cohesion. It's just so ridiculous. And do providers actually want that? Like, they want insurance, but do they want to be on the state insurance? What are the implications of that? It just, I don't know. I just get whiplash every time I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah, I hear you. So that piece of legislation is sponsored by Senator Rebecca Perkins Coker from Portsmouth. And I know that she does, she's in communication with the folks that what's that name of that group? The childcare
advisory council and ELNH. But still, the question was, providers, do you want insurance? It wasn't, but if you do it this way, here are the things that are going to happen. You're going to pay dues. You're going to, whatever it is, it's just not very well informed or thought out. It's just so knee jerk. I would like to see that change.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for you, right? That's a bigger question than one that I can solve. But I would say reach out to her and ask her. We were chatting last night about a piece of legislation not related to the work that you all do, about prohibiting the use of spend down of PTO before a parent takes parental leave, for example. So she was working on this piece of legislation to essentially tell employers you can't ask an employee to use all their PTO before they go on parental leave. And it's a great idea, right? But I told her my personal story of what I had to do when I had my kids, which is that I was on short-term disability for my parental leave because we didn't have a parental leave policy. And what that meant was that my pay was 60% of my salary. So I had to top off that other 40% with my PTO to make my livable wage, because I couldn't survive off of 60%. And she was like, oh, that's an unintended consequence, right? And so they're blissfully sometimes unaware of the unintended consequences. And unfortunately, they're not public policy experts and they're not researchers. So they rely a lot on those personal stories. And I think they're being hit, not in her defense, but they're being hit by so many angles, saying childcare, recruitment, retention. And, national think tanks across the country are just throwing research publication after research publication about what ideas we have for recruitment and retention, and providing public health benefits is one that comes up quite a bit. So yeah, let's keep that conversation going, because without your input, without my input, she may not know. And when that language comes out too, I'll be sure to share it with you.
I feel like I need to hire an attorney to review all of the things that would impact if I had a business, or, we're leading a childcare center. You need an attorney to unpack all of that. Advise you.
Yes. Yeah, no, I totally hear you. I totally hear you.
Amy, isn't that what the Couch Foundation was talking about doing, right? Bringing somebody on board with that expertise.
This is why it's needed, to kind of review those things and find those unintended consequences before it becomes a problem. Because that sends a really bad message to our legislators that you want this, you don't want this.
That's just to toss in. I mean, that's something that the schools I was working with did. There's McLean Middleton is a big law firm that represents a lot of schools in New Hampshire, and they had a person who would periodically, report to schools, here is education related legislation, and do exactly that role. And it just seemed really valuable. And I don't know, it might be prohibitively expensive, but it really would be a great coordinating step.
John, that makes me think of my experience in public education. I think it's every October, because I was just thinking it's the first one I've missed in 15, 20 years. There was the Kidder Conference, and the attorneys would come to the Grapponi Center and we would sign up for the day of the different ones, and they would go through all the new legislation so you understood it. But they were the ones who throughout the year would do Zoom meetings and say, you know, did you know this is being talked about coming down the pike? This is how it's going to impact your school if it goes through. And I'm wondering through the ECEA, as part of our advocacy work, we could find funding, because the hard part is with school leaders, we could take a day, even though most of us were walking outside on our cell phones and then coming back in, but we could take a day, whereas providers can't. I think that's the hardest part when it comes to PD or anything else, it's time.
Mhm.
But if through NACI, right, if there are the directors meetings, if NACI in combination with some other organizations like New Hampshire Charitable Foundation or some Vermont organizations could do something along those lines, if it doesn't exist, that might be helpful. And you know, Mackenzie, I will connect you with Alice as well, because I'm not quite sure how many legislators are coming to that meeting that she's talking about, the bi-state. But when you were talking, I was like, oh, I should loop you in as well. And kind of, I think Alice is trying to figure out her design of that morning, but it's a great opportunity. Even if you only get one or two people, you're getting two people that really understand all the sides of the issues versus doing exactly what you and Amy were just talking about. So I will make those connections. And I see that you're right. You're still advocating for a lobbyist. Yeah, I think I'm excited by what Jackie shared, because we've been talking about that gap.
Yeah.
And also we're kind of fine tuning down what we really need, our experts in the field, to get out in front of some of these things before they become law, then they become unpacked, and people realize it was for a good cause, but it's not going to do what it intended to do. It's causing more harm. Just an example, what Tammy shared today. You know, it's just, it doesn't make sense, and it's not about providers or children or family. Really, when it comes down to the end of it. So we have some upcoming opportunities for advocacy through networking. I think is the biggest thing that we're all doing right now, is networking, connecting the dots, trying to have a better understanding of what's happening and following what was agreed to happen in both Vermont and New Hampshire. We do have our next meeting on October 27th, which will come up fast because things are flying by. Anything that people want to add before we end the meeting today?
I'll just add one funny thing if I can, which is not really funny, but we were talking about the 306 rules earlier, and I was thinking about the legislation that is kind of coming down from our representatives, and there is an LSR right now whose title says relative to the qualifications for the Commissioner of the Department of Education. So
really,
you can have that little piece of fun for your Friday.
Oh, I needed that. Thank you,
Oh, thank you for that. That's great.
I think there's a rainbow coming over that hill on the other side there.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you for your patience. Also, with my allergy season, it's just kicking in hard this year. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and I will talk to you soon. Take
Bye,
care.
everyone.
Bye-bye.